Earlier today, I sat down with Sadiq Amini. He is Afghan. He worked for the State Department at the U.S. Embassy in Kabul for 9 years as a political assistant. He was evacuated with U.S. troops and U.S. employees in August of 2021. In 2022, he received the U.S. State Department's Heroism Award. Today, he's a non-resident fellow at the Observer Research Foundation America here in Washington, D.C. Here's my conversation with Sadiq Amini. Sadiq, nice to have you join me.
Nice to be here with you, Greta.
The United States seems to have miscalculated how fast the Afghan government would fall. Did you realize it was going to fall that fast, the Afghan government? Should the United States have known that?
Yes. There were different information channels that was passing along information from Afghanistan to Washington, telling them that if you're going to pull out all of the troops and if we're going to zero, the Afghan national security and defense forces will not last. But I think that information was not taken seriously in Washington.
Why do you think it wasn't taken seriously?
That's up to the U.S. leadership to respond. I think they were misjudging the capabilities that the Afghan security forces had, or the reliance and dependence that Afghan forces had on the U.S. forces.
You know, there's a lot of sorrow in this country about the 13 who were lost at Abbey Gate, but there were also about 170 civilians lost, Afghans. So I imagine that, I assume you talked to people back in Afghanistan. I assume that pain is felt as well in Afghanistan, the 170?
It's beyond the 170. There are 40 million Afghans who have lost all of their hopes for the future and the livelihood that they have. More than 20 million Afghan women and girls are practically in prison. They do not have any right whatsoever. The basic rights of going to school, going to university, going to work, or going out of their houses. And recently, they were not even allowed to speak because the Taliban leader decided that women speaking out in public is illegal. So the pain and suffering and the tragedy is much bigger than lives of 107. On a daily basis, people are being disappeared, people are being killed, people are being raped, and this is a tragedy that's going on every day.
You know, I don't think people realize in America this war lasted so long that a lot of young girls were born when there's a lot of Western influence. The United States was there. So they never grew up with the Taliban. They only heard stories about the Taliban from their mothers and their grandmothers and of course, the male relatives. And so they grew up basically like, in a sense, like I did, with Western values. And all of a sudden, the Taliban takes over and they go back to that.
Yeah, they heard from their mothers. Their mothers had to live through the Taliban regime, and they never thought that it would happen in their lives. Now their daughters are going through the same suffering and tragedy that their mothers had, and it's very unfortunate. Every generation has to face that sort of violence, that sort of repression.
No, so no education for girls or women.
Yes.
Can they go out?
They cannot.
So they can't even go to a store.
They are basically, it's illegal for them to speak, it's illegal for them to get out. Recently there were buses that were transferring a couple of women to go work in a factory, and the Taliban fighters in the middle of Kabul city, they stopped the bus and started beating the women for being out of their houses. What they should do, they wanted to earn a living, they had to work somewhere, but they just want women to be imprisoned in their houses.
Do you have the sense that, from my perspective, it looks like we made a lot of promises, maybe not in writing, to the Afghan people that we were going to take care of them and help them, and all of a sudden one day we got up and left, and we lost 13 at Abbey Gate. We shut down an Air Force base. We basically left in the middle of the night. We turned off the lights and we left. Is there a sense that we didn't carry our commitment out to the Afghan people? Are they resentful towards us?
There is a lot of resentment. There is a lot of sense of betrayal. And there was commitment on paper. We have bilateral security agreement between the United States and Afghanistan that both of the countries, both of nations would come in assisting each other in times of crisis. And Afghanistan was facing a crisis, an onslaught by a terrorist organization called the Taliban, and the U.S. forces did not back us. They went and made deal with the Taliban instead of making a deal with the Afghan government to withdraw. And that was not appreciated by the Afghans. And even now, Afghans expect the United States and international community, but particularly the United States, for them to come back to the agreement that we signed, come back to the commitment that was made, and stand on the side of the people. Stop talking with the Taliban, stop engaging with the Taliban terrorist organization, and recognize that it is a gender apartheid that's going on in Afghanistan, and recognize that what's happened in Afghanistan in the past, it's repeating again. 25 years ago, the Taliban was in charge, and what was happening in the world? What happened in the United States in 2001? And right now, again, the same group is back in charge. The same terrorist organizations are back in charge. What's going to happen next? Just match the dates. I'm not going to say anything. I'm worried.
You know, one of the wonderful things we have in this country is we have a free press, so that at least the media can put a spotlight on things that we think are injustices or corruption of our government. Recently, the media has always been suppressed and oppressed by the Taliban, but now it's gotten just worse recently, hasn't it?
Yes, it's terrible. They've brought all of the media officials into the Ministry of Information and Culture, and they've told them that they're not going to be able to run their media entities, have their journalists hired, have their staff hired, or bring any guests without the permission of the Ministry of Information.
So if I wanted to book a guest on my show there, I'd have to get approval of the government?
Absolutely. You're no longer free media. You're a branch of the Taliban organization, basically. All of the Afghan media in Afghanistan is basically a propaganda machine right now that is only serving the Taliban propaganda.
During the time the United States was in Afghanistan, there were a lot of people, a lot of lawyers that we trained to be prosecutors to try to work with crime and to prosecute people for committing crime. Now the United States is out of there, and I'm told that the people who were prosecuted by the Taliban is prosecuted by those prosecutors are now hunting down those prosecutors to kill them.
Absolutely. The prosecutors, the judges. Just recently there was an explosion, like all of the former prosecutors and judges who did not leave Afghanistan and they wanted to stay, just hoping that maybe they will continue to do their work of justice, but they were all killed in an explosion. And the tag name that was put into it was the Daesh, the ISIS-K, that we know that ISIS-K in Afghanistan is basically the Taliban branch.
A lot of people from Afghanistan want to come to the United States. They've been pretty much said that this would be an opportunity and it's cut off. They don't get those special visas.
There's so many Afghan allies who worked for the U.S. government and work with different international organizations and different countries around the world, and they all want to leave because all of them are in danger. Their lives are in danger. Their families' lives are in danger. And there's no hope for them to stay in Afghanistan. What are they going to do if their daughters are not able to go to school and if their boys are going to send to madrasas to be trained as suicide attackers? Who would want to stay in that environment?
You know, we can't police the world. The United States can, and it's a complicated problem. But you know, there is a sense, at least for me personally, a sense of dishonor when we've sort of suggested that we were going to do something, and then we failed to do it. You know.
I mean, I would suggest do it for yourself. It's not for the sake of Afghanistan, it's for the sake of the United States, protecting the U.S. interest. I mean, already Daesh, which, as I stated, is a branch of Taliban, have already increased their attacks in Europe. They have already undermined security in Europe. They have already infiltrated people in the United States, and the threats are increasing. So it's the United States taking care of the homeland security by tackling the terrorist threats that is right now in Afghanistan and is increasingly becoming more dangerous in Afghanistan.
Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Appreciate it.